Let's be real, the world likes to pretend women are soft, fragile, or too emotional to handle pressure. But here's what no one tells you: pressure doesn't destroy a real woman, it sharpens her. She becomes a diamond in the fire. You see, there's a twisted narrative that women only rise when men fall, that a woman can only thrive in a man's struggle as if her strength is a reaction, not a choice. That couldn't be further from the truth. A woman doesn't wait for a man to fall so she can rise. She rises because she's built differently, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. She thrives not because a man struggles, but because she's used to living in a world that never handed her anything. Let's talk facts. From a young age, women are told what to wear, how to act, how loud to laugh, how quiet to cry. We're told we're either too much or never enough. That if we lead, we're bossy. That if we speak up, we're aggressive. That if we're ambitious, we're intimidating. And yet, despite every stereotype, every box, every invisible ceiling, women show up every single day. And they don't just show up, they build, they nurture, they create, they lead quietly or boldly with grace or grit, but always with purpose. You want to know how women thrive in what's called all man's world? They do it by rewriting the rules, not because they want revenge or dominance, but because survival isn't optional. Because waiting around to be rescued is a luxury most women don't have. So no, she doesn't thrive in his struggle. She thrives in spite of it. She thrives because she's been underestimated, overlooked, and silenced. And every time the world tried to dim her light, she learned how to shine without permission. Let's go deeper. When a man breaks, the world gives him space. They say, he is just going through something. But when a woman breaks, she's expected to keep functioning. She's supposed to carry her pain in silence, smile through the storm, and still show up like nothing ever happened. That's what no one talks about. The emotional labor women carry. The internal battles they fight that no one applauds. The way she holds everyone else together while quietly falling apart. And when she finally says enough, the world labels her dramatic or unstable. But here's the truth. When a woman decides to stop breaking for people who never noticed her cracks, she becomes dangerous. Not in a chaotic way, but in a powerful way. She becomes grounded, focused, selective. She stops explaining herself, stops begging to be understood. She becomes a force that doesn't need validation. You see, a woman who has walked through fire doesn't wait for applause. She doesn't ask for acceptance. She knows her worth. And when you know your worth, the noise doesn't distract you anymore. So no, she doesn't thrive because of a man's downfall. She thrives because she finally chose herself. It takes courage to heal in a world that profits off your insecurity, to walk away from people who want access to your energy but not your heart, to set boundaries, speak truth, and stay soft in a world that tried to harden you. That's real strength. And let's be clear, women aren't against men. They're just done shrinking to make men feel taller. They're done pretending to be less so someone else can feel more. They're done being guilt-tripped for being powerful. This isn't about war. It's about balance. A confident man doesn't feel threatened by a powerful woman. He respects her. He learns from her. He grows with her. But if your masculinity is so fragile that a woman's success feels like your failure, you're not ready for her. Because women aren't thriving in men's struggle. They're thriving in their own lane. They're choosing purpose over pressure, peace over chaos, healing over toxicity. And maybe that's what threatens the world. Not the idea that women are rising, but the fact that they're doing it without permission, without apology, and without needing anyone to validate it. So if you're a woman listening to this, hear me, you don't need a reason to thrive. You don't need anyone to break for you to rise. You're not built to wait. You're built to walk, to bloom, thrive in your own timing, in your own silence, in your own power. The world will adjust, let them. A woman thrives in her own power, not a man's struggle. That truth cuts through every false narrative society has tried to feed us. For too long, the world has painted this subtle but persistent imaging that a woman's success is born from a man's weakness. That when he fails, she gets stronger. That when he crumbles, she builds. But that's not power. That's dependency wrapped in disguise. And real women, the ones who walk through fire and still carry grace in their eyes, They don't wait for a man to lose so they can win. They rise because they've learned how to fight battles no one even saw. They rise because they were never given a safety net, so they had to learn how to fly on their own. This idea that a woman needs a man's downfall to find her voice is not only false, it's insulting. It assumes that her power is reactionary, that she only becomes something valuable when he becomes nothing. But the reality is, from day one, most women are thriving in silence while carrying the weight of everyone else. She's the one holding down the home, holding back her tears, holding space for people who never even asked if she was okay, and yet she still shows up every single time, stronger, wiser, more aware. A woman's power isn't borrowed. It isn't handed down from a man. It doesn't awaken when someone else fails. It is born in the soil of her own struggle, grown through the rain of her own tears, strengthened by the storm she had to survive when no one else stayed. A woman thrives because she's been living in a world that told her to sit down and smile when she wanted to stand up and speak. A world that praised her silence and punished her strength, that asked her to be beautiful but not too loud, ambitious but not threatening, independent but still submissive. And in that contradiction, in that pressure, in that impossible tightrope she's forced to walk, she learns. She learns to navigate a system that wasn't built for her. She learns how to move with intention, how to grow in spaces designed to contain her. And that growth, that's not something she found in a man's shadow. That's something she cultivated in the light of her own truth. Do you know what it takes to be a woman who thrives on her own terms? It takes courage to walk away from roles that suffocate you. It takes vision to build a future without waiting for someone to hand it to you. It takes discipline to heal without closure, to grow without support, to speak when your voice shakes, to love yourself when the world only praises you when someone else approves. That is what it means to thrive in your own power. It's not loud. It's not always glamorous. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's lonely, but it's real. And it's rooted in something unshakable. She doesn't need a man to fall for her to shine. In fact, most of the time, she's rising while holding others up, while fixing what someone else broke, while pouring into cups that never poured back into her. She thrives because she learned not to wait for someone else to rescue her, because she's tired of begging to be seen, because she's done apologizing for wanting more. That kind of woman is not reacting to someone else's failure. She is responding to her own calling. Powerful women don't compete with men. They build themselves regardless of men. They don't depend on his mistakes to feel significant. They find their value in the identity they formed through prayer, through persistence. The truth is, many women have had to wear armor they never asked for, carry burdens they never chose, fight for dreams that everyone laughed at. And somehow, through it all, they still stand, not because someone else failed, but because they decided to stop failing themselves. Thriving doesn't mean stepping on someone to get ahead. It means refusing to step on yourself any longer. It means no longer settling for half love, half effort, half recognition. It means no longer staying quiet just to keep the peace. Because thriving is not about external circumstances. It's about internal alignment. When a woman realizes her worth, when she finally believes she doesn't have to shrink to be accepted, she changes the whole atmosphere around her. And that shift is not dependent on anyone's struggle. It's born from her decision to stop struggling against herself. This is why people misunderstand powerful women, because the world is used to seeing women as dependent, as soft, as background. So when she walks in and commands space without asking for permission, it unsettles the fragile. Not because she's doing anything wrong, but because she's no longer hiding. Her success was never about revenge. It was never about proving someone else wrong. It was about proving herself right, about looking in the mirror and saying, I deserve to take up space. That kind of power is rooted. It's unbothered. It's magnetic. And no, it does not come from anyone else's downfall. Let's be honest. A woman who thrives in her own power is often misunderstood. She's called intimidating when she's just focused. She's called selfish. She starts choosing herself. She's called cold when she stops overgiving. But here's the secret. She's not angry. She's not bitter. She's just done betraying herself. She's done waiting for validation. She's done making herself small so someone else can feel big. She's done surviving because now she's thriving. And when you're thriving, you don't need chaos to motivate you. You don't need pain to remind you of your worth. You don't need someone else to fall apart for you to finally feel whole. You wake up and decide, today I will show up for me. Today I will protect my peace. Today I will speak my truth. Today I will live on purpose. That's the difference. Women who thrive in their own power don't wait. They don't wait for the world to get easier, for the love to become perfect, for the people to understand them. They build anyway, they trust anyway, they love anyway. And when the world finally notices, it's not because she became someone new. It's because she stopped hiding who she always was. She thrives in her own power because she understands this life will not always be fair, but it will always be hers. Because she's tired of carrying potential like it's a burden, tired of waiting for someone to give her permission to feel powerful, tired of playing a role that doesn't fit the truth of who she is. So she chooses her own path, not to escape anyone, but to return to herself. That is not selfish. That is sacred. She doesn't thrive in a man's struggle. She thrives in her own awakening from day one. And when you look at a woman who's thriving, don't assume it was easy. Don't assume someone else had to lose for her to win. Understand that her power was paid for in night. She cried herself to sleep. In mornings, she didn't feel like getting up, but did anyway. In seasons where everyone counted her out, but she kept counting on God. That's where her strength comes from. Not from someone else's collapse, but from her own resurrection. She is not a reaction. She is a revelation. She is not a backup plan. She is the vision. She is not waiting for someone to fall. She's learning how to fly. And every time she doubts herself, she returns to this true thing. I was not created to shrink. I was not made to survive in silence. I was built to rise, to love, to lead, and to thrive in my own power. Society expects women to break quietly and heal silently. That expectation is stitched into the fabric of culture so deeply that most don't even recognize it as oppression anymore. They see it as femininity, as strength, as grace. But what kind of strength demands a woman suffer without sound? What kind of grace requires her to carry pain like a secret she must never speak of? From a young age, women are taught how to smile through discomfort, how to laugh off disrespect, how to apologize for emotions that were never even wrong. They are conditioned to suppress, to endure, to stay quiet, for the sake of appearances, for the sake of others, for the sake of peace. But that peace comes at the cost of her voice. And eventually, silence stops being a choice and becomes her identity. There's this unspoken rule that women must absorb everything: words, wounds, betrayals, abandonment, and still be kind, still be soft, still be available for the needs of others. When she's heartbroken, she's told to move on gracefully. Flash from day one. When she's angry, she's labeled emotional. When she's overwhelmed, she's told she's being dramatic. And when she finally walks from what's been destroying her, they say she's giving up too easily. They don't see the months, sometimes years, she spent pretending everything was okay. They don't hear the silent prayers she whispered through tears no one knew she cried. They just see her final act of courage as a threat to their comfort. Because a woman who stops breaking in silence and starts healing out loud makes people uncomfortable, not because she's wrong, but because she finally refused to carry pain that was never hers to begin with. The world has romanticized the idea of a woman who suffers quietly. She becomes the hero of sad songs, the muse of broken poetry, the backbone of dysfunctional families. She becomes the girl who held it all together, who never complained, who sacrificed everything. But let's be real. Those words are just polished praise for neglect. They're just socially acceptable ways to glorify her silence while ignoring her suffering. And over time, even she starts to believe that speaking up is weakness, that expressing pain is selfish, that setting boundaries is unloving. So she keeps pouring, even when her cup is empty. She keeps smiling, even when her soul is exhausted. She keeps showing up, even when she desperately wants to disappear. Not because she doesn't feel, but because she's been trained to believe that her feelings are a burden. It's not just in relationships either. It's in workplaces where she works twice as hard and gets half the credit. It's in families where her worth is tied to how much she serves. It flags from day one. It's in friendships where she's the therapist, but never the one being asked, "Are you okay?" It's in religious spaces that preach compassion, but expect her to forgive without justice. Every space, every system reinforces the same messaging: break quietly, and for the love of everything, don't make it messy. Don't be inconvenient. Don't be too much. Just be resilient. Just be understanding. Just be strong. But what society really means when it says be strong is suffer silently. And strength is not silence. Strength is truth. Strength is acknowledging the wound so it can actually be healed. But healing in silence is not healing. It's hiding. And you can only hide pain for so long before it starts showing up in other ways. In your body, in your relationships, in the way you speak to yourself. Women who are told to stay silent often end up screaming inside. They lose touch with who they are. They forget what joy feels like. They shrink to fit the roles everyone else demands. They become everything to everyone and nothing to themselves. And even then, when they finally collapse under the weight, the world still asks them to get back up with a smile. There is something deeply wrong with a culture that teaches women how to fake peace, but not how to fight for it. That tells her to suppress rage, but never how to process it. That asks her to forgive quickly, but never gives her space to grieve deeply. From day one, women aren't angry for no reason. They're angry because they were told to internalize what should be confronted, because they were asked to be understanding in situations required accountability, because they were silenced when they should have been supported. That anger isn't the problem. That anger is the alarm. It's the body's way of saying, this pain is real. This injustice is not okay. This silence is suffocating me. And yet, when a woman begins to use her voice, the world panics. She's told she's bitter. She's accused of being cold. She's labeled hard to love. But the truth is, she's healing. And healing is not pretty. Healing is raw. It's loud. It's full of tears and truths and boundaries that disrupt the status quo. Healing means saying, I will no longer carry shame for someone else's mistakes. Healing means choosing yourself even when others call it selfish. Day one, healing means letting go of roles that demanded your silence and stepping into an identity that demands your truth. It's time we stop praising women for how well they suffer and start honoring them for how courageously they heal. It's time we stop expecting them to be emotional vaults and start giving them permission to feel fully, to express freely, to exist honestly. A healed woman is not a threat. She is a mirror. She reflects the parts of this world that are still broken, still oppressive, still unjust. And that's why society prefers the broken version of her, because the whole version no longer tolerates what she used to endure. She no longer apologizes for saying no. She no longer pretends to be okay for the sake of others. She no longer chooses silence over sanity. Let's be clearing, silence is not always strength. Sometimes silence is survival. And many women have been surviving their whole lives. But survival is not living. And a life lived in emotional captivity is not a life. It's a performance. A woman who is truly alive doesn't perform her pain. She processes it. She doesn't smile through trauma. She speaks through it. And that voice is what society fears the most, because it challenges the systems built on her silence. It threatens the comfort of those who benefited from her compliance. But she's waking up. And once a woman wakes up to her own power, her own voice, her own worth, she doesn't go back to sleep. She doesn't go back to whispering when she was born to speak. She doesn't go back to pretending when she was meant to be real. She doesn't go back to breaking quietly when her healing now demands to be witnessed. She is learning that her emotions are not too much, that her boundaries are not rude, that her voice is not a disruption. It's a declaration that she matters, that her story matters, that her healing is holy. And even if the world still wants her to stay quiet, she no longer obeys, because she knows that silence didn't save her. It only delayed her transformation. And now, she's not breaking quietly anymore. She's breaking open. She's breaking through. She's healing loudly enough for the women who still think they need to whisper their pain. She's becoming the proof that you don't have to suffer in silence to be strong. You just have to survive long enough to remember your strength was never in the silence, but in the survival itself. A woman who chooses herself becomes unstoppable. It's not because she's selfish, arrogant, or rebellious. It's because she finally understands the cost of abandoning herself to please a world that will never love her the way she deserves. For too long, she was taught to shrink, to compromise, to bend until her back broke. She was taught to love others more than herself, to prove her worth through sacrifice, and to wear her pain like a badge of honor. But something changes the moment she realizes that her healing will never come from the hands of those who broke her, that her peace cannot be found in the approval of people who only loved the version of her that kept giving without boundaries. When a woman chooses herself, she doesn't become hard, she becomes whole. She begins to understand that love without respect is manipulation, that loyalty without reciprocity is exploitation, and that staying where she is not seen is a betrayal of her soul. For years, she said yes when she wanted to say no. She stayed silent when her spirit was screaming. She tolerated disrespect in the name of keeping peace. But now, she's done choosing peace at the price of her own destruction. She's done dimming her light so others can shine. She's done being the emotional caretaker in relationships where her needs were ignored. She's not bitter. She's just finally brave enough to walk away from anything that makes her feel less than she is. Choosing herself doesn't mean she's closing her heart. It means she's protecting it. It means she's no longer begging for love she knows she deserves. It means she's tired of being the fixer, the forgiver, the one who always shows up, even when no one shows up for her. Because the truth is, a woman can only break so many times before she either gives up or rises up. And she's choosing to rise, not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because she's tired of betraying herself to make others comfortable. She's tired of being everything for everyone and nothing for herself. She's tired of performing strength when what she really needed was space to be human. When she chooses herself, people will call her difficult. They'll say she's changed. They'll say she's cold or ungrateful. But that's just the sound of boundaries to those who benefited from her having none. That's just discomfort from people who mistook her kindness for weakness. That's just resistance from a world that doesn't know what to do with a woman who no longer needs to be validated to feel valuable. She doesn't need applause to know her worth. She doesn't need attention to feel beautiful. She doesn't need to be chosen by anyone else to know that she is already enough. This woman is no longer waiting for permission. She's no longer trying to fit in spaces that stifle her voice. She's no longer afraid to take up space, to speak her truth, to follow her dreams, even if she walks alone. And yes, it gets lonely sometimes. Choosing yourself isn't always glamorous. It means outgrowing friendships. It means walking away from family dynamics that are toxic. It means grieving the version of yourself who accepted less because she didn't know better. But that grief is sacred. That grief is transformation because it leads to rebirth. It leads to freedom. It leads to power. When a woman chooses herself, she starts showing up differently. She stops explaining her worth. She stops entertaining relationships that drain her. She stops engaging in conversations that belittle her soul. She sets standards and she keeps them, not because she thinks she's better than anyone, but because she finally understands that she's worthy of the love she so freely gives. She knows now that loving herself is not an act of pride, it's an act of survival. And that self-love doesn't mean bubble baths and candles. It means doing the hard work, facing the wounds, sitting with the pain, letting go of fantasies and false hope. Choosing herself means she no longer waits to be saved. She saves herself, and that scares people because a woman who chooses herself can't be controlled. She can't be manipulated with guilt. She can't be broken with silence. She can't be tamed with promises that never come true. She doesn't chase, she attracts. She doesn't beg, she commands. She doesn't settle, she elevates. And she carries this quiet, unshakable confidence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. You feel it in her presence. You see it in her walk. You hear it in her voice. She's no longer playing small. She's no longer hiding her brilliance. She's no longer waiting for someone to see her. She sees herself. This woman understands that choosing herself doesn't mean she stops loving others. It means she loves from overflow, not depletion. It means her cup is full, not because someone else filled it, but because she finally learned how to pour into herself. She wakes up every day and gives herself what she used to beg for: validation, kindness, forgiveness, encouragement. She becomes her own sanctuary, her own advocate, her own protector. She no longer looks to the world to tell her who she is. She knows. And when you know who you are, no one can use your insecurities against you. She becomes unstoppable because her power no longer depends on external circumstances. It's rooted in something deeper, in truth, in alignment, in purpose. She understands now that her time, energy, and attention are sacred. She no longer gives them away to people who don't respect them. She's not afraid to say no. She's not afraid to walk away. She's not afraid to be misunderstood because she'd rather be misunderstood in her truth than loved in her illusion. She'd rather stand alone in her authenticity than be surrounded in her silence. And don't mistake her softness for weakness. This woman has walked through fire. She has cried herself to sleep. She has loved people who didn't love her back. She has broken into pieces and rebuilt herself with bare hands. She has known betrayal, rejection, abandonment. And yet she still shows up with grace. She still loves with depth. She still believes in beauty. But now she does it with discernment. She doesn't romanticize red flags. She doesn't chase potential. She doesn't make excuses for people's inability to meet her where she is. She doesn't lower her standards to keep anyone around. If they can't rise to meet her, she rises alone. Choosing herself also means she learns to forgive, not for others, but for her own peace. She lets go of bitterness, not because what happened was okay, but because she refuses to let it define her. She no longer carries the weight of other people's choices. She no longer holds onto pain that was never hers to begin with. She forgives the girl she used to be, the one who stayed too long, who tried too hard, who didn't know her worth. She honors that version of herself because she was doing the best she could with what she knew. And now that she knows better, she does better. There's a glow in her eyes that no makeup can replicate. It's the glow of self-awareness, of peace, of freedom. It's the light of someone who no longer chases love because she is love. It's the light of someone who no longer fears the future because she trusts herself to handle whatever comes. This woman is no longer defined by her past. She's writing a new story, and this time she's the main character. No more side roles, no more background silence, no more invisible labor. She is front and center, owning her narrative, taking up space, and rewriting the script. A woman who chooses herself becomes unstoppable, not because she's perfect, but because she's real, she's rooted, she's resilient. Her power doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being grounded, from knowing who she is, what she deserves, and what she will no longer tolerate. She's not here to impress. She's here to express. She's not here to fit in. She's here to stand out. She's not here to survive. She's here to thrive. And she's no longer afraid to outgrow the life that once made her feel small. She knows now that the world will adjust to her truth or not. Either way, she's not dimming her light, not anymore. She's not choosing herself because she hates others. She's choosing herself because she finally loves the woman in the mirror. She's choosing peace over pressure, truth over tradition, freedom over familiarity. And that choice makes her unstoppable. Because once a woman chooses herself, the game changes forever. True empowerment isn't about replacing men. It's about restoring balance. It's not a war. It's not a rebellion. It's not a competition where one must fall for the other to rise. It's about remembering what was lost when women were silenced, and what was broken when men were taught they must never feel. It's about healing, not conquering. And yet, the moment a woman begins to rise in her truth, society assumes she's trying to dethrone a man when all she's doing is finally claiming the throne within herself. This isn't about power over men. It's about power over self. It's about taking responsibility for the voice within that has been buried under centuries of conditioning and saying, I will no longer betray my soul to fit into a world that only values my silence. Women were never meant to live in the shadows. They were never created to be ornaments, accessories, or afterthoughts. The same God who breathed life into man breathed power into woman. The same Creator who formed the stars gave her wisdom, fire, and grace. For generations, that fire was suppressed. That voice was silenced. That wisdom was mocked. But now the rise of women is not about revenge. It is about restoration. It's about the restoration of harmony, the recalibration of humanity, and the return of balance in a world that has tilted too far in favor of dominance, hierarchy, and control. Empowerment is not a title. It's not a loud protest or a social media trend. It's what happens when a woman no longer needs external validation to define her worth. It's what happens when she leads from wholeness, not wounds. It's what happens when she learns to lead without imitating what broke her. Because true empowerment doesn't mimic domination. It reflects divine order. It isn't about flipping the script so that women now oppress men. It's about writing a new script where everyone is allowed to show up as their truest selves. The empowered woman doesn't walk into a room to outshine a man. She walks in knowing she no longer has to dim her own light. The narrative that empowerment is a threat comes from fear. Fear that a woman who knows her worth cannot be manipulated. Fear that a woman who walks in her authority will no longer beg to be chosen. Fear that the balance of power will expose the fragile foundations built on inequality. But the truth is, women rising in power doesn't mean men must fall. It means the world can finally stand. Because without the fullness of both voices, both hearts, both strengths, there is no completion. Men and women were created to be co-creators, not competitors. They were never meant to be in a tug of war over dominance, but in partnership rooted in purpose, dignity, and mutual honor. And yet, look around, what we've normalized is anything but balance. We glorify aggression and dismiss intuition. We value logic and mock emotion. We push for results and forget about wisdom. The world has praised force and forgotten the power of presence. That's not strength. That's distortion. That's what happens when we sever the feminine essence from leadership, from family, from faith, from culture. We wonder why the world is restless, why homes are broken, why hearts are cold. It's because we've lost the nurturing, the listening, the stillness that only the feminine can bring, not as weakness, but as divine design. Empowerment is not about erasing masculinity. It's about embracing femininity without apology. A truly empowered woman doesn't need to become a man to succeed. She doesn't need to toughen up, speak louder, or prove her strength in traditionally masculine terms. Her strength is in her softness that doesn't bend to control. Her power is in her ability to feel deeply and still choose wisely. She doesn't dominate, she influences. She doesn't force, she transforms. And when a woman is truly empowered, she doesn't emasculate men, she inspires them. She doesn't need to stand above them. She stands beside them, secure in who she is. She doesn't see men as her enemy. She sees them as fellow souls on the same battlefield, each fighting their own unseen wars. She knows that true strength is not about overpowering, but about partnering. But to reach this level of restoration, we must unlearn the lies. We must deconstruct the myths that say a woman's place is only behind or beneath. We must stop raising daughters to be pleasing instead of powerful. We must stop teaching sons that emotions are weakness. We must heal the places where patriarchy has harmed men too, where it's told them they must always lead, even when they're tired, that they must always be strong, even when they're breaking. We must break the generational curse that says one must be silent for the other to speak. That one must dim for the other to shine. That's not empowerment. That's imbalance masquerading as order. A woman in her power doesn't wish to become a man. She honors him. She honors the masculine when it is rooted in integrity, protection, and truth. She honors the man who stands in his own quiet strength without feeling threatened by hers. And in that space of mutual respect, something divine happens. Balance returns, the kind of balance where the man doesn't lead because he has to, but because he's capable. The kind of balance where the woman follows when it aligns, not because she's forced. The kind of balance where decisions are made through unity, not control, where love is not about who has the upper hand, but who has the open heart. We live in a world that's slowly waking up to this truth. The old models are crumbling. The loudest no longer hold the most influence. The most aggressive no longer automatically gain respect. Something is shifting. The feminine voice is rising, not in opposition, but in restoration. And this shift is not a threat to men, it is a gift. Because when women rise in power, they don't rise alone. They pull others up with them. They rebuild systems with compassion. They restore families with wisdom. They lead communities with empathy. And in doing so, they don't erase the masculine. They remind it of its original purpose, not to dominate, but to protect and empower. We must stop seeing power as a pie, where more for one means less for the other. True power multiplies when shared. True power creates space, not walls. A woman rising in her truth doesn't take anything away from a man who's secure in his own. In fact, she calls him higher. She challenges him not to compete, but to grow. She inspires him not to fear her, but to evolve with her. Because a woman who is empowered changes the atmosphere. She raises the standard. She doesn't accept half love, half truths, or half effort. And when she leads like that, everyone watching realizes that strength doesn't have to scream to be felt. Balance means redefining leadership. It means allowing women to lead as women, not as replicas of male strength. It means recognizing that a boardroom needs just as much intuition as it needs data, that a home needs just as much structure as it needs tenderness, that a church needs both prophecy and presence, that a nation needs both strategy and compassion. Empowerment means recognizing that feminine traits are not liabilities, they are legacies, that the ability to nurture is not inferior, it is life-giving, that the heart is not a hindrance, it is holy ground. So when a woman steps into her power, don't see it as her stepping over anyone. See it as her stepping into what was always hers. Don't reduce it to rebellion. Don't twist it into competition. Don't paint her as angry or bitter when she's just finally speaking up. Because if a woman is bold, it's because she was silenced too long. If she is fierce, it's because she was forced to fight to be heard. If she is firm, it's because she had to build strength in a world that kept testing her softness. And if she is rising, it's not to tear down anyone, it's to rebuild what was broken. Empowerment is not a role reversal. It's not a seesaw of who gets to lead. It's a restoration of what should have never been lost balance, honor, unity. It's a return to truth, not just about gender, but about humanity. Because a world where only one voice is heard is a world that limps forward. But a world where every voice rises in harmony, that's a world that heals. That's a world that thrives. That's a world where the strength of men and the wisdom of women no longer compete, but complete one another. That is true empowerment. That is restoration. That is balance.